Welcome, bienvenidos. Welcome to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival of 2023. I'm Rebecca, and I'll be your moderator. And I want to remind our audience, please read our anti-harassment policy in the chat box. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival's YouTube channel. And if you're a school or a classroom, a librarian, educator, and you're joining us, don't forget that we have a school visit fund. And this means that you can win a free virtual visit from a Latinx author or illustrator for your classroom or library. You can find the link to the entry form in the chat. All right, so now we can get started with our panel, Finding Familia. Let's introduce ourselves, starting with Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. I am Elizabeth Santiago, and I have written the Moonlit Vine, which is right here. It's also translated into Spanish, Claro de Luna. And it's, do you want me to say anything about the book at this point?
Well, sure, give us a quick.
Sure. So it's about a 14-year-old Puerto Rican girl who discovers her personal power by finding out her lineage or her Taino ancestry. And so she finds voice through discovering who she is and discovering the past.
Oh, excellent. Letisha.
Yes, hi. My name is Letisha Marrero, and I am the author of Salsa Magic. And it's about a 13-year-old girl named Maya, and who comes from a loud but loving family who own a restaurant in Brooklyn. And chaos ensues when an estranged great aunt shows up from Puerto Rico, who is rumored to be a witch. So yeah, so yeah, lots of adventure, lots of food, lots of history.
Excellent. Jonny.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jonny Garza Villa. I wrote Ander and Santi Were Here about a non-binary muralist named Ander who falls for the newest waiter at their family's taqueria. It takes place here in San Antonio, Texas, and I like to think of it generally as just a story of love, and always romantic, platonic, familial, a love of culture and art and food, and the love of yourself and the things in which we create and provide to the world.
Yeah. And I'm Rebecca Balcarcel. I'm the author of 2 novels, but I'm actually here to talk about Boundless, which is an anthology of short stories that I co-edited with Isme Williams. And this is full of lots of wonderful mixed race authors or bicultural or biracial authors, 20 short stories. So I contributed a story as well, but I'll mention more than just my story because there's so many book stories I'm really proud of in here. And the theme is that growing up mixed identity search. So, well, okay, let's jump in with a question. This is called Finding Familia. So let's start with how, just tell us how family can feel, what feels to your character. Like, we know family sometimes is this enormous blessing, but it can also be a curse with the roles and expectations and things. So how does your character feel about familia or found family, if that's the case? Elizabeth, we want to start with you again.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I love this topic, of course, because family is such a strong part of our cultures. And in my book, Taina, our protagonist, she loves her family. She loves them. They don't always love her back. And so, she has a lot of personality, and she's often told to tone it down a bit, be a little bit more quiet. And she's learning to find balance and find her voice. And she struggles with that. And her mother doesn't help her. Her mother's is a sort of they're in this struggle, as mothers and daughters sometimes are. And she, like I said, loves her family, but often is having a little trouble just trying to find her space, her voice, and be appreciated for who she is. And I think that's a big part of growing up.
Yeah, it really is. Letisha, what's your character dealing with when it comes to family?
Yeah, well, Maya is, like I said, she comes from a large family who have this family-run business, a restaurant, and so a lot of the story takes place within the restaurant and how they interact with each other. And she thinks she comes from a loving family, but then this great Tia shows up and realize that she's never met this woman. She's only heard rumors that there was this witch in their family, and she has been estranged from her sister, Abuela Chacha. And so, the kids are instructed not to go near her, not to talk to her. But Maya feels this pull to her, this connection to her, because she actually has been seeing this woman in her dreams and didn't realize it until she actually saw her face to face. So the adventure begins when she's she's defiant, and she sneaks around, and she finally meets this woman, and they realize their connection, and also to Santeria, and the Yoruba tradition, and the histories of the Orishas and the all the deities, the gods and goddesses. She starts to learn about that. And she can't understand why this sweet old woman would be estranged from her family all this time. So it's a discovery process for her. And then she ends up kind of being the bridge between the generations to bring them back together.
I like that. It seems like both of these characters are, like carving out new ground, new territory with, like, it's not that they're running away from family, but there's like a new wing that needs to open up to make space for who they are and what they're learning. And Jonny, what about you?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the words of like blessing and curse are both just so like exactly for me, especially when it comes to like Onder, whose family is super supportive and just full of day ones. And it's like, oh yeah, my child wants to go to art school, fully support that. But like, why aren't you in college immediately? Why are you taking a gap year? What is this happening? Like we love that you want to go to college, and so like stop working so many hours at the taqueria. Like get your stuff in order. We need you to very much like we love that you're in the nest, but we need you to like start moving on eventually. And like even when it comes to like their queerness, their identity, their sexuality, their family is very much like, yeah, we embrace this. This is great. We love it. Let it flourish. But also like this new boy comes in to the taqueria and they're like, maybe not that one. And so like there's so much like support and love, but also just like I think in these like fences in which Onder I think feels that they're just kind of like trying to jump over and over and over, which is really fun to write and just see them get just so annoyed with their family. but yeah, but I think ultimately, like, I think they know that their family is someone who's always going to come to bat for them. They love each other just as much as they drag each other, and I think fully like that's just kind of their own love language.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that like I really wanted to encapsulate just those vibes of like the wild Mexican family who's just there, fully like the inside Mexican eight is like just kind of the regular at the house and stuff like that. But yeah, that was kind of like the vibes.
Oh, cool. I can relate to some of that. I mean, my Latino side is my father's family, and that's yeah, the wonderful chaos, and just serious discussions, even fights, that are ultimately okay, but it's boisterous. Yeah. In Boundless, there's a lot of uh, different families portrayed, but they all have something in common, that they're mixed. And one of the stories that fascinated me was Ismay Williams's story, which is called Thicker Than Water. And in that family, the sisters are they're both mixed race, but one is darker skinned than the other. One speaks Spanish more fluently than the other, and it turns out it's the lighter skinned sister who speaks Spanish more fluently. So it's confusing to outsiders. It's a little confusing even to insiders. And so, like, there's still that sense of having to figure out your place within the family, because even sisters aren't having the same experience as they go through the world, being perceived in different ways. And folks, walk up to the darker skinned sister and speak Spanish, and then the other one answers, and it's just um, they're navigating it, and they're also kind of playing with it as they grow up, and as they encounter, especially like a romantic possibility, and who uh, um, and in my own story, uh, my main character is she visits a Mexican restaurant, but she's not fluent in Spanish, and so she's like venturing further toward her family by going, um, but at the same time she's torn. So, like, within the family, some people sort of speak to her Anglo-ness, and others kind of speak to her Latino side, and they pull and push at her. And in a lot of the stories, that's the dynamic. In one story, by let's see, by Lorian Ryan, I believe, she's the parents are divorced, and so when you which side are you going to be now? Like, which half of yourself are you going to be able to develop and fully, like, inhabit? It's a problem and a blessing, to have two cultures to try to somehow merge within yourself. So, yeah. Well, let's think about characters who maybe oppose the view of family that our characters have, and does anybody challenge the main character when it comes to their family or their place in the family?
Yeah. I was thinking about what you said, Rebecca, and just what everyone has shared, to respond to this question, because my main character is sort of like Letisha's, like the bridge between this old world, if you will, and the new. And her grandmother, of course, Abuela, and by the way, Letisha, Abuela Chacha is like one of the best names I've ever heard. But the Abuela in my story is the conduit to like this Taino history and the history of Puerto Rico, and is sharing that. But her mother doesn't want a part of it because she had so much pain, sort of being othered in the States when she came here from Puerto Rico, and being darker skinned and like just sort of being othered all around, that she just gave up any knowledge of that or any desire to know more. So her daughter, or the main character, Taina, just didn't have the understanding, the knowledge, all of that, and got that from her grandmother, who is struggling with Alzheimer's disease. So the memories are coming in a little bit of a scattered way, but they're coming through enough that she's starting to understand that there's more to their history than just what she understands and what her mother is allowing her to experience. And it's her mother's trying to protect her, which we know how hard it is, for some folks to just be their authentic selves, but it doesn't help, and we know that doesn't always work. But it's interesting that I don't know if anyone's necessarily challenging her, but they also aren't giving her full space to experience all aspects of the identity, all aspects of her identity, all aspects of the history and culture, because they weren't allowed to necessarily. And that's the outcome for where she is.
Yeah, and that is so typical that the first generation is very eager to assimilate or busy trying to just survive, really, and emotionally too, physically,
Right.
of course, financially, but then out of fear for what the child will experience, they are protecting, quote protecting, but they're actually denying
Yeah.
some of the richness that's really still available. Yeah. Oh, I love that, Letisha.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Maya doesn't understand why her family has estranged this woman, who she's becoming more and more fond of, and it actually leads to, and because she loves her abuela Chacha. They are characters in and of themselves. They used to be like salsa king and queen of Bayamon,
Oh,
and they dance around the restaurant, and so there's this very loving side to her, and so she has a really hard time reckoning with the fact that this woman could just cut her sister off like that. And it does lead to a big scene, where Maya confronts her abuela and says, how can you do this? She's family. And abuela Chacha, was like, I mean, how most abuelas would talk, how dare you talk to me like that, very stern, and she ends up walking away from it or storming off. And it is a pivotal scene, because she realizes at that moment that she has to find a way to bring them back together,
yeah. So to heal the family and
to
heal
heal the
herself.
family. Yeah, because at that point she wasn't really sure what the wound is, what caused the estrangement. It happens later on in the book, but when she does, it does. Everything kind of comes to light, but it has enough time has passed where there is forgiveness and healing. So
Nice. Jonny.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily like an opposing view, but I think whenever Santi sort of enters the picture as an undocumented immigrant, as someone who came to the United States, to Texas, on his own, who lost his father and his brother and left his mother and his sister, and is separated from another sister. Like I think like there's this sense of like I have all of this family on Ander's side who've like been with me for me, and in comparison to Santi, who is trying to find home. And I think like in a way, like whenever it comes to Ander and their art and their murals, and Santi sees these cultural things that remind him of home and the things that he would see on the streets of his hometown, and eats Anders Tita's food and is like, oh my god, this is my favorite, and all these things, it kind of like builds a home for Santi, in a way that like is both like his own, but also like Ander gets to share with him and they get to share with each other. And yeah, so I think that like it's like a sort of building of family and what family and home mean for someone, and all of the love and complications that happen whenever you have family, but like ultimately all of the support and everything like that comes with it too.
Yeah. It's so often a double-edged sword because yeah, they they're your family, but but they're your family. Yeah.
Right.
um, I'm thinking of one of the short stories by Jasmine Varga, and it's called Searching. And in this one, the girl is half, is it, oh dear, I want to say Palestinian. But she's wants to go to the old country, and similar to some of what Letisha said and what Elizabeth said, she feels disconnected from the culture, from the lore, from the food. She's trying to reconnect by actually her father dies, and so she's trying to reconnect kind of on her own, and her family is not really helping her. They're saying, well, why do you want to go to the market where they sell the food of the family? Or why do you want to go to visit the country and spend time over there? What's that going to tell you? What's that going to give you? You have to just grieve and say goodbye. But it's not only the death of the father, it's also her own identity that she needs to sort out. And so she has to kind of go against the family to reclaim that or to explore that. They're thinking she should sort of just move on and not worry about it, and not worry about that part of herself, because aren't you fine here? Don't you have everything you need here in the States? Why do you need to go digging up stuff? It's not necessary. So I'm trying to find, if I find the correct country, I will correct myself. But
it looks like someone in the chat said Jordanian.
oh, thank you, Jordanian. Yes, yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, so she's really struggling to be within the family and also go against the family, but in order to connect to another part of the family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about connections from your own family to your fictional characters? Did you model the families in your book after your own family, or did you want to make them different? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I found that question. I thought it was very amusing because everything is sort of modeled after my family, but this is, not exactly, right? Because like this story is fiction. It didn't happen. Nothing happened like this in my family, but a lot of those emotions and sentiments and dynamics, let's put it that way, were present in my own family, and so being an observer, I was that kid in the corner, just kind of watching everybody. And then as I got older, was documenting a lot of like these things that I was seeing, but I couldn't quite, define. And a lot of that stuff ended up in the family dynamic in the book, which I think is like, so it feels like it could be more universal. A lot of us struggle with these ideas of identity, especially, trying to connect back to our roots and trying to understand what that is. And then in the case of the native people of Puerto Rico or the Tainos, like we didn't have a lot of documentation about it. So like we're piecing together a lot of things. And so it just makes that struggle even harder. And so, just highlighting a lot of things that maybe I've experienced, but just making sure to put it in the context of this story. But I love that question. It's phenomenal.
Maya's family is the similarities is, I do have a younger sister, but kind of the family dynamic in terms of the intergenerational and the fact that she's growing up with her cousins, and she has a tia cousin, and that was kind of modeled after my mother's family, who all kind of grew up in one brownstone in the Bronx, so these women, who I grew up with thinking that were my tias were really my second and third cousins, right? So, but you still call them titi. So, I kind of wanted, and they were all so close and hilarious together, and fighting and all this stuff. So I wanted to have that kind of same feeling with Maya's family. So, but I also understand firsthand, being the oldest child, to a younger sister, that dynamic as well. So I drew a little bit from my own experiences, although I'm more Salma than Maya, if that makes sense. Maya's kind of everything I wanted to be growing up. Whereas Salma is more like, how I was. So
that kind of reminds me how authors tend to say there's a little bit of themselves in every character, but some characters really are closer to our conscious selves anyway. Jonny, go ahead.
So I think, like, specifically, Ander's grandmother, their tita, does have a lot of qualities of my own grandmother, like her love for the Spurs fully in there, and just kind of like her like sort of like attitude. I was like, what if like my grandmother was kind of like mixed with like Rita Moreno, and like just like put that into a character. And I think like as far as Anders' father, their father, like I see a lot of like just, I think in general, like a lot of the men in my family are the sort of like quieter support, the kind of like their presence is there, but they're not necessarily like the most talkative in the family. Whereas like I think like on the opposite, like Anders' ma is very much like a lot of the women in my family who like are very much like I have an opinion, I'm going to speak on it. I went with best for you, and I think you need to know exactly what I think. And so like I think that like sort of like generalizations are in there, but I think like if there's anyone in specific, it's like Anders Dita comes the closest to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my grandma fully saw it. She read the book and she fully thought that like there's some of her in there.
Abuela Chacha also has characteristics of Rita Moreno too. I modeled it after, as if my abuela was Rita Moreno.
That's amazing.
Right. I think like similarly to Rebecca, there's a little bit of all of us in every main character. There's a little bit of Rita in every abuela.
Exactly.
Yes.
There is. And I have to mention that in Boundless, there's a short story called "I Like to Be in America." And of course, the famous West Side Story song, and it's by Anika Fajardo. And in that, she's a Latina who expects to get the part in this. It's not the whole musical that they're performing, but it's like songs from West Side Story, I think. And so she assumes she'll get the part because she looks more like Rita Moreno than anybody else, but her voice is not quite a match. So she ends up having to realize that, that's not the only consideration when they assign the parts. And but she learns that like she gets to be in the ensemble with her friends, and that's really valuable, and their friendship is what really matters and all that. So it's a sweet story, but we have to shout out Rita Moreno.
Rita the Queen.
The Queen, yes.
La Reina, Rita La Reina.
Yeah, La Reina, exactly. Yeah. In my story, I think the family isn't playing a big role, but yet it's everything, because my character is, she goes with her white friend to this Mexican restaurant, and the white friend is excited to be in an authentic experience, and is kind of getting shown around by a partially local type person, but my character is sort of she's not sure if that's she's not sure how to feel about that, because she's not really comfortable like being the representative of the whole culture, especially because she's mixed, so she feels like a fraud, really. And at the same time, she does know a little Spanish. She's not sure if she should use it, because then maybe the waiter will start speaking like this big stream of Spanish to her. So she's like carefully not speaking it, but then speaking a little. And but I feel like her family is in the background, of course, of her entire like genetic situation here and ethnic situation that she's trying to figure out. But in real life, that was me. My dad is from Guatemala. My mom was a Peace Corps girl, and she went there for 2 years, and so they met in Guatemala and decided to come to the United States. And yeah, I did grow up very much in the hyphen, and because it was Iowa where I was born, and it was 10 years before we moved to Texas, it was extremely like monochromatic there in my town. There were no tortillas, miles of corn, but not a single tortilla. So when we moved to Texas, it was a whole new world, and I found that I could connect. And one of the things that was a revelation was like the Latino grocery store or whatever. And that shows up in my story, that she's imagining that there's some kind of rainbow connecting the Kroger, which is the kind of like mainstream grocery store, and the Fiesta grocery store, which is where they buy like more authentic things, because she's trying to connect and to be a whole person.
I honestly do kind of love, like, especially as like a Latina living in America, like we are part Kroger and we are part Fiesta. Like that's just so relevant.
Yeah. And our Fiestas are in particular neighborhoods, and so you get the whole experience going, to see more people on the street, more people talking outdoors, and it's nice to go to the Fiesta. So let's see. Do we have any questions from our young people or from our audience that we want to bring in? Let's see. Tori, a 7th grader from Rachel Carson Middle School, asks, are your characters based on real people you know? If so, do the real people know this?
Well, I have a response to this because I forgot to mention that there is also a community store in the Moonlit Vine, because these stores are so, of course, important. Like they were like our after school program. I would go into the store and hang out with the owners and stuff like that. But in this case, the owners of the store are a couple named Hilda and Jose, which is actually the name of my sister and her husband. And I modeled them after the two of them because they are always arguing, but it's kind of like a loving arguing. I can't describe it any other way. And I wanted to capture that because I thought it was funny, and they're funny. And so that's their role. They argue the entire book. Anytime they show up, they're like in some kind of argument. And when my sister read it, she texted me and said, "This is hilarious." So she saw her name, of course, and the name of her husband, and she just said it was funny to her. So, but I didn't do that anywhere else. It was just that they inspired that couple. So I said, why not, right?
Yeah,
that's a great question, by the way. Wonderful question.
I love that. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Well, in my
go ahead, Johnny. Go ahead, Johnny.
In my first book, 1500 Miles from the Sun, I was getting a lot of advice on like college applications and financial aid and stuff like that. And one of my best friends is a financial aid counselor and has been for a while. So I was leaning on him a lot for like advice and how one might talk to someone in my main character Julian's shoes, and like what advice you would give him. And so I basically made him the financial aid counselor in the book. Like just replace his name with like a take on his name. Did not even notice. He listened to the audiobook and did not catch it. And I was like, did you figure out like there? Did you see it? Did you hear it? And like, no, had to go back. And like, this was obviously you.
That's funny.
That's great.
Letitia.
My characters were more like a composite. Like I said, I wanted Maya to be everything that I wasn't as a kid. When she's brave and I had the defiant part down. She's sassy, she's confident. I wanted to create that character. And then, just the dynamics between the big sister, little sister. That was from my own experience, but not modeled after my own sister. And then, like I said, my own, tia primas and primos. Again, it was a composite of, just what it was like to grow up in that kind of family.
Yeah. In my book, my novel Shine On Loose Velis, a half sister shows up, and I have a real life half sister, which I did not know until I was already an adult, and we met. I was in my 30s actually, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to write about this, because what if we had met when we were kids? And I kept thinking, wouldn't that have been really interesting if we had, grown up together, or at least known each other? And so that's part of what inspired the whole book, actually. So yes, I guess the answer is yes, we do. We do.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of writing is just what if, right? And then your imagination goes from there.
Yes. And I see we have another question in the chat. What Latinx or Latine writers helped you want to be a writer? Ooh, this is by Joan Villegas. Wow, there's so many. I have to just immediately say Sandra Cisneros before we and
shout out to Sandra.
And Meg Medina. Who's just everything.
She's one of my favorites. Yeah, I love Meg Medina. Love her.
Blueberry winner, for those of you who don't know. Mercy Sweatish changes gears, and so many other books. And
yeah. I think for me, like Rodolfo Anaya, author of Bless Me Ultima, I think like as someone like me, Benjamin Alir Science has to be shouted out.
He's great.
I can't just ignore him. I think Gabby Rivera and Juliet Takes a Breath as a contemporary storyteller was such a big thing for me. But I also love talking about like not necessarily writers, but like growing up amongst storytellers, like my grandfather and my uncles. And I think especially in Latina families, like we have those sort of storytellers in our families. And like, that's really what I wanted to be. I wanted to like write, like they tell stories. And I think I even like tried, like in my mentality, consider myself more of a storyteller than a writer first. And so like, I really shout out like my grandfather and like people in my family like that like really inspired me to want to be a writer.
I love that, Johnny. I'm reacting very excitedly because that's amazing. Same here. Yeah.
For me, I mean, the first Latina writer that made me want to be a writer was Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Yes.
His Love in the Time of Cholera basically changed my life. I was like, the way he strung words together, I was like, that's what I want to do. Currently, and also Esmeralda Santiago, who wrote When I Was Puerto Rican. That was, so relatable to me. You already mentioned Meg Bedita. She's like a goddess. And I actually just met Donna Barba Higuera the other night, who happens to be my pub mate, and she wrote The Last Cuentista, which to me was one of the most amazing books I have read in a few years. So I was really excited to meet her, and she's a total sweetheart. And I'm really excited to read her next book, Ali Brijes. I've got it on my TBR pile right now, on top.
We stand Donna in this house for sure.
And I just have to add in Elizabeth Acevedo, because when I read the Poet X, it was just something that was so amazing to me. I was like, okay, the bar has been raised, and I just love her work.
Also shout out to Daniel Older. He's another friend of mine who, he was an inspiration to me. His whole story, how he started out he was an EMT, and he used to just start blogging about his tales, being in an ambulance. And people were so riveted to those blog posts that he was like, oh, maybe I should start writing a book. And that's what he did. So, and he's basically living the dream right now, writing the whole Star Wars, saga. So, proud of him. And I think he's an amazing writer too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so inspiring. And let's not forget poets. I mean, just like even classic poets like Pablo Neruda or Garcia Lorca, or more contemporary Martín Espada. I turn to poetry when I'm stuck in my writing too. So
I love poetry and how it's just so great at like speaking so beautifully and elegantly about like mundane things that I think prose writers sometimes are like, I can't spend scenes writing about like the yellow car that belongs to my tío. But like I think we should. I think like there's beauty in mundanity, and like I think that they're just holding it down for us like that. And like I think we should I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. The details that are chosen they resonate, they reveal character, and poetry reminds us that the well-chosen tiny thing can just make the whole story. Yeah. Let's see. We had another question. Let's see. What Latin characters in books or on screen helped you to first feel seen? And what do you want for your readers? Oh, boy.
It's a good question.
West Side Story we mentioned, but I think that's worth mentioning again. Yeah. And of course, I mean, we've had Disney has come through with Esperanto, and what's the other one? I'm sorry, Encanto and Coco. Yes, right. Yes.
I know there was like when I was younger, I'm pretty sure they were Latina. There was this show on Nickelodeon called Rocket Power about like this group of like 4 kids who were like just spend time like out in their like seaside town roller skating and doing like sort of like X gamey kind of like sports. And like I was like, I want to be them so bad, and I want to be their friend. And like I think that was the closest to like seeing like animated characters my skin tone color, and like just kind of like navigating the world and having fun and making mistakes and all like that. I still like I was like, if I can do some sort of IP for Rocket Power, like if Nickelodeon's watching, like I would fully
and they can bring back, actually they're bringing back Backyardigans, I heard. So but yeah, do you guys remember a show, I think it was Disney, called Taina?
I don't remember this.
It was probably about maybe 15 years ago.
An old show,
it was the first time I'd actually seen like a young person, who looked like me, and she was in high school, and she was just like this normal kid. And I was like, that is so, that is so cool, and it wasn't on the air long enough, as most of Latina shows are not, which, that's a whole nother panel. But yeah. I remember her because she had dark skin like me, and of course the name Taina, really stood out to me. So like Elizabeth is Taina. I have a Taina. I have a Taina in my book too.
Oh, do you really? Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna have to find the show first. And like, I love that. I love that name. Of course, I use it as my protagonist name too. And for me, like, I maybe didn't see a lot on TV or in film necessarily when I was growing up. But where I did see it, I was grew up in the '80s, was in like music. So. Like Lisa, like when I saw her, I was like, oh my God.
Sheila E. for me, Sheila E.
Like those folks, or like, freestyle music. Like that's when I was like,
Lisa.
Yeah, like expose or whatever. But anyway, that was, and that stayed with me actually, because that when the second part of the question, like, what do you want for your readers? Like, I want them to have more. I want them to have as much representation as they possibly can have from us as writers, and anything and everything, because there wasn't much, and there just wasn't much.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's really the main motivator for why I wrote Salsa Magic, because
Yeah,
as much as I loved to read as a kid, there was nobody who looked like me or sounded like me or had my experiences. I was reading,
yeah,
the typical Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary and all that kind of stuff, which were great, and Roald Dahl, but they, they weren't me and they didn't look like me. And the same thing with TV. So I wanted to create a book that Latina kids could see themselves in at least one of the characters. If it's not Maya, then Salma. If it's if
right.
maybe you're a twin. There's a set of twins in there. Maybe maybe you have the same type of abuela. Something that you can really say, oh, that's me.
Hmm.
Yeah,
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 I
that
had
makes sense.
to I had to look at Ricky Ricardo and Lucy to find a mixed race couple on television. I mean, they were it for decades. Actually, that they were it. So I feel like mixed representation is really starting to be more visible. But I really feel like this book is exciting for me because of that particular identity getting more visible and more attention, more exploration. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
Well, what is everybody working on now or next, or what's in the future for you? Jonny, could we start with you?
Yeah. So my third young adult novel, which is called Canto Contigo, comes out in April of 2024, April 9th, 2024. I like to describe it as like in part a grief novel dedicated to my grandfather, who was a mariachi and lived for many years with Parkinson's disease, but
Mm.
also in part a rivals to lovers romance story, all about the epic highs and lows of high school mariachi, with a sprinkle of magical realism in there. Yeah, so we're working on getting that together, and hopefully maybe another YA out at some point in the future. That takes me back to Corpus Christi, where my debut novel took place,
Mm.
and another soccer book.
Ooh,
Mm.
wow, lots of
Yeah.
excitement. Oh my gosh. Well, Letitia.
Ya no sé.
Okay.
I've been getting that question a lot, even before Salsa Magic came out, which was just, like 11 days ago.
Oh, okay.
And I said, can I let this one breathe first? Can I just, I wanted to see, if it landed, if it resonated, to decide if I wanted to do something else with it or if I need to do something else. And I'm thinking about it, and Donna kind of inspired me to do this. It's not necessarily a sequel, but like a companion piece, where maybe it follows another character in the book and their journey. So that I'm just kind of noodling with that right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll see where it takes me.
Oh yeah, lots of possibilities there.
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in the midst of writing. I'm working on a middle grade, so a little bit younger audience, but about a young boy. I've always been fascinated by murals in the city. And so he's part of a program that paints murals across the city, but as he's painting folks, neighbors, community members, he's also solving mysteries that they present to him. And so it's kind of a little bit like when I was younger, I used to love Encyclopedia Brown, again, dating myself, but I love those mystery stories. And like, I kind of knew one day I would want to put something together like that. And so this is my version of that. And so just in the midst of writing.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that sounds great too. I want to read all of these. So my next project is looking like a middle grade novel, which would be my third. And I am struggling with a rewrite right now. I'm just, like, there are days I just don't want to even click to open the file. I'm just cranky about it right now, but it's going to be great, I hope. And it'll star a Guatemalan adoptee, so a girl who grew up in the United States but returns to Guatemala to meet her birth family and to solve an environmental threat or defeat an environmental threat to the village where her birth mother is from. So I'm excited to get to write about Guatemala, my father's country, and my country. So that's the headache and the joy right now in my life. We have a question in the chat. How much say do you have in what your cover looks like? Yeah, the book industry is very interesting when it comes to this. Jonny, would you like to
Yeah,
respond?
I mean, I think in my experience, it helps if you have a clear idea of what you want it to look like beforehand. Like in my debut book, I really had no idea what I kind of wanted. And so I think in that way, my say and what it ended up being kind of diminished. I kind of got like two separate ideas and was like, pick one. And that was basically it. But for Under and Santi Were Here, like it's based off of an actual photograph that's mentioned in the novel. And like my agent, my editor who acquired it, we were all like, that's gonna be the cover, right? Like it's a whole thing in the book. And so I think in that moment, whenever like everyone kind of agrees, it's easier to push for like, no, that's gonna be it. Like when it diverts, we can correct them. Like I sent you a single photo in the Google Doc about the cover. Let's go back to that. And like in Caso Contigo, similarly, I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted except for that I wanted the characters to have mariachi charos. So this is kind of like what it looks like at the end. At first, they did not have charos on, and that was kind of a battle that we had to fight for a little bit. And so, yeah, like I guess I've had an opportunity of where like I didn't know what it was or what I wanted, so they gave me something. I did know what I wanted, so they made it that, and then I kind of like halfway knew, and it took a little bit of effort to get them there. It kind of just varies, I think, uh, yeah, on a lot of different things.
Yeah, mine was serendipity. That's the only word I can say to this because my editor is the one who found the illustrator is named Rudy Gutierrez. He's amazing. And, I really wanted somebody, who was Latina and, he is, from the Bronx, a Boricua from the Bronx, just like my family is. And I guess my editor just gave him a galley of the book and he just imagined it. And the version that you see now and behind me was the first draft. I mean, the first thing I saw when I looked at it, I said, oh my God, that's Maya. Like she was just this amorphous idea in my head. But as soon as I saw her, I was like, that's her. So
wow.
So yeah,
it's so fun. I mean, Letisha, I had the same experience, and I can't say what's normal or not, but it's amazing that we had the same experience because I didn't have it's a debut novel for me. I didn't have a sense. Jonny, thank you for that tidbit of advice because next maybe I will, but I didn't have a sense at all of what the cover would look like, and they gave the draft of the book to Laylee Frazier, who's the artist, and she imagined what Taina would look like, and she did the moon, and I mean it was just, when I saw it I cried. I'm gonna be honest, because I said, oh my God, I would never have imagined this, but it's exactly perfect, and it was her first attempt at it too.
Yeah, I still get chills looking at it.
Yeah.
I do.
I do too. I agree.
Yeah. Well, and every publisher is a little different, and I think each book is different. We had like a bit of a cover adventure with Boundless where, one person was working on it and had a particular idea, and we were tweaking that, but then things shuffled and a whole different person came forward, and then we were looking at the art of several people, and then they did give us some input on who we liked best, just looking at sort of like samples and portfolios. And so, I really love the cover and what they came up with. So sometimes you have some say, sometimes you really don't. But hopefully, I think they want you to be happy, because we're all on the same side trying to make the book a great experience for readers. So, yeah. Well, is there one last piece of advice you would have for writers? Let's start with Elizabeth this time.
Yeah, I mean, I always say just go with your voice. I teach creative writing, and students often ask me, should they write to what's popular? And I say no. I say write what's in your heart, write what you want to write the story you want to tell, and then worry about the marketing and all that later. Don't let that get into your head. Because if I had done that, I would never have written this book. Like this is the story I wanted to tell, and I'm happy I did it, and I'm glad someone, Lee and Lowe, saw it and thought, yeah, this is a story worth getting out in the world. And so anyway, I say just write what's in your heart.
Good advice, Letisha.
Yeah, I would say, well, Salsa Magic has been an idea and a draft for on and off for about 20 years. I kept going back to it, putting it away, then life would get in the way. Then I'd go back to it. I was a single mom for a little bit. Then when things steadied out, I'd go back to it. And, finally I had something at the very end. My agent kept prodding me to do it and, gave me some inspiration to do it. But the story to me was like an itch that I couldn't scratch. Maya just kept coming back to me, and sometimes a story will do that to you. Sometimes you're like, I just got to tell this story. And the thing, with the Latina diaspora is like, there are so many stories that need to be told, not just Maya's, not just mine, not just Johnny's, not just Elizabeth, not just Rebecca's, but everybody has a story to tell. And I think I'm going to take my own advice when I said earlier, just ask yourself the question, what if? And see where that takes you. You never know where a story is going to take you, but you just have to imagine the possibilities.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Johnny.
Those are both so good. I think I would just second Elizabeth's, and just especially while it's not your job, while you're not an author under capitalism, while while this isn't something that you're hoping people give you human money for, take time to let it be an art, take time to let it be a craft, and develop those things and figure out the genres that you love writing and the stories that you love writing and the sort of character aspects that speak to you, and all of these things that you can just let flourish, and sometimes even not flourish, sometimes fully speed bump and crash into something that is wow, that's not for me too. And that's also just as valuable, and be able to take that time to figure out what you love and you don't love about storytelling and the things in which make up your own voice. Use that time really well, and have fun with it, I think is the best that you can do right now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Have fun with it, not be afraid to experiment, and like you said, crash around, splash around. There's so much happening in in middle grade space, for example. There's a lot of verse novels. There's a lot of time, multiple points of view, timeline shifts. I think YA is seeing some of that as well. And of course, the literary fiction world, poets are having lots of fun. So don't be afraid to experiment with everything. Try everything. And then I would just add to read a lot. Apprentice yourself to those masters. You may feel like, oh, I don't get to study with so-and-so. But if you read their book, you are studying with them.
Right.
And you can read for pleasure, and then you can go back and read again more analytically, how do they introduce a character, or how do they do the dialogue, how do they weave description and action so that we're not bored with too much of one thing. And so reading really is the grandest teacher. And I teach creative writing too, Elizabeth, so I know that the class is helpful, especially for giving deadlines, but I feel like the real masters are the authors we admire and the authors that touch us. So,
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone for attending our Finding Familia panel. at the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. And have a lovely, lovely day. Adios, everybody.
Thank you.